What if I told you that the harder you try to be happy, the more miserable you are basically mathematically guaranteed to become?
It sounds completely backwards, I know.
Right. Think about it. You walk into literally any bookstore today, and you are just immediately ambushed by the self-help section.
Oh, yeah, the neon covers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's this towering wall of neon-colored spines, and they're all screaming the exact same message at you. Smile more, grind harder, manifest your millions, unlock your inner genius.
Just become a relentless, unstoppable force of pure success.
Yeah. We are practically drowning in this cultural obsession with positive thinking.
We really are. And it's a very specific, almost aggressive brand of sunshine and rainbows. But the truly insidious thing about that cultural obsession is the underlying premise.
Which is what, exactly?
Well, the unspoken message of every single one of those books is that you are currently incomplete.
Wow. Yeah, that's true.
Right. The baseline assumption is that you are somehow defective right now. But if you just memorize a few more affirmations or adopt the morning routine of some tech billionaire, you will finally reach this mythical state of perfection.
And that is exactly the assumption we are tearing down today.
Yeah.
Because what if all of that, the obsessive self-improvement, the relentless positive thinking, the constant chasing of some idealized, totally frictionless version of success?
What if that's the problem?
Yes. What if everything you've been told about how to live a good life is actually the exact mechanism that's making you miserable?
It's a huge question.
It is. So today we're doing a deep dive into a stack of source material that takes a brutally honest, entirely counterintuitive approach to human happiness.
Highly counterintuitive.
For sure. It's heavily drawn from Mark Manson's work, specifically The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Feck. And the mission of this deep dive today is to basically unpretzel your brain.
I like that. Unpretzel it.
Yeah, we are going to strip away all the toxic layers of conventional self-help, look directly at the messy, painful reality of being human, and figure out what truly matters. And we do that by being incredibly, ruthlessly careful about what we actually choose to care about.
And just to set the psychological baseline for everyone listening right now, our conversation today is not going to be about feeling good all the time.
Definitely not.
Right. If you tuned in looking for a quick emotional high or like a list of empowering mantras to shout at yourself in the bathroom mirror, you are going to be deeply disappointed.
You might want to skip this one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We are going to explore the actual mechanics of learning how to suffer better. It's about recognizing our own inevitable limitations, accepting that life is inherently flawed and full of friction, and finding profound meaning not by avoiding that friction, but by stepping right into it.
And to really hammer this home, the material starts with the absolute last person on earth you would ever expect to find celebrated in a self-help book.
Oh, this is my favorite part.
We need to talk about Charles Bukowski.
Bukowski.
Yes. By all conventional, polite standards, Bukowski was a total disaster of a human being.
An absolute train wreck.
He was a drunken, gambling, womanizing deadbeat. I mean, he desperately wanted to be a famous writer, but for decades, his work was universally rejected.
And not just standard rejections, right?
Right, no. Editors didn't just send him polite rejection slips. They actively told him his writing was crude, disgusting, and completely unpublishable.
He was literally the antithesis of the modern entrepreneurial success story.
Right.
Like there was no optimized morning routine, there was no gratitude journal. He spent roughly 30 years working this soul-crushing day job sorting mail at the post office.
30 years?
Yeah. And he blew whatever meager paycheck he earned on cheap booze and the racetrack. He'd routinely wake up passed out on his own floor. He lived in absolute squalor, just surrounded by self-loathing.
But then, the plot twists.
It always does.
When Bukowski is about 50 years old, an editor at this tiny independent publishing house takes a weird liking to his raw, completely unfiltered style.
They see something in the mess.
Exactly. They offer him a tiny contract, barely enough to survive on, honestly. Bukowski quits the post office, writes his first novel in 3 weeks, and dedicates it to nobody.
To nobody. Classic.
And he actually blows up. He goes on to sell millions of books, becomes a literary icon, and achieves the exact fame he always wanted.
Now, if this were a normal self-help book...
Right, this is the part where we'd say, see, he never gave up on his dreams. The American dream is real.
Cue the inspirational music.
Exactly. But here is the profound kicker. When Bukowski died, the epitaph carved into his tombstone was just 2 words.
2 words that change everything.
Don't try.
Don't try. I mean, it's an incredibly jarring thing to read on the grave of a massively successful author.
It really is.
But if we analyze the underlying philosophy there, it unlocks everything we are going to discuss today. Because Bukowski's eventual success did not come from some relentless Tony Robbins-style determination to be a winner.
Right.
It came from the exact opposite psychological posture. Bukowski knew he was a deeply flawed loser. He accepted it entirely.
He leaned into it.
He didn't try to polish his image or pretend to be sophisticated, He wrote with agonizing honesty about his own failures. He never tried to be anything other than exactly what he was. His actual genius wasn't determination. It was his unflinching comfort with himself as a failure.
Okay, let's unpack this. Why is the modern obsession with trying to be a winner so psychologically damaging?
Well, the source material points to a cognitive trap. It's called the feedback loop from hell.
The feedback loop from hell.
And I know anyone listening has experienced this. So you get anxious about a major presentation at work. Your heart is racing.
Sweaty palms, the whole deal.
Right. Then your brain notices your heart racing and you think, why am I so anxious? I'm a professional. I shouldn't be sweating like this.
Oh, man, yeah.
So now you are literally experiencing anxiety about your own anxiety.
Or you get angry about a minor inconvenience, like someone cuts you off in traffic.
Exactly. Then you immediately get angry at yourself for being so petty and easily triggered, which just compounds the anger.
It just spirals.
It does. This is a fascinating biological quirk of human consciousness. We possess metacognition. We have the evolutionary luxury of being able to think about our own thoughts.
Right.
And our modern consumer culture has entirely weaponized this quirk. We were bombarded 24/7 with curated images of people living seemingly perfect, ecstatic lives.
Social media is just an endless highlight reel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this creates an unconscious baseline where we believe that our negative emotions, our anxiety, our guilt, our sadness, are anomalies. They are treated as unacceptable defects.
So when we inevitably feel bad, we feel bad about feeling bad, we layer shame on top of a basic human emotion.
It's like being caught in psychological quicksand. If you panic and thrash around trying to get out of the quicksand, you actually sink faster.
Right. The struggle makes it worse.
Your frantic effort to save yourself is the exact mechanism that kills you. You only survive quicksand by relaxing, spreading out your weight, and accepting the mud.
That is such a brilliant way to frame it. And it aligns perfectly with a concept introduced by the mid-century philosopher Alan Watts. He called it the backwards law.
A backwards law. It's so fundamental.
The backwards law basically states that the desire for a positive experience is in itself a negative experience. Yeah. And paradoxically, the acceptance of a negative experience is in itself a positive experience.
It's completely counterintuitive.
This blows my mind every time I think about it. It's exactly like trying to fall asleep.
Oh, that's a perfect example.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you ever stared at the ceiling at 3 a.m., actively trying to force your brain to shut down?
Of course. And it never works.
The harder you try, the more frustrated and wide awake you become. The conscious effort of trying to sleep actively prevents sleep. You only fall asleep the moment you surrender and stop trying.
Exactly.
The author argues this applies to everything. If you desperately want to be rich, the very act of chasing wealth reinforces the internal belief that you are currently poor and unworthy. And that happens regardless of how much money is actually in your bank account.
The trying reinforces the lack.
Exactly.
Pursuing the positive generates the negative. But if we invert that, we find the core mechanism for growth. Pursuing the negative generates the positive.
Wait, unpack that for me.
Well, think about working out. The physical pain and muscular tearing you endure in the gym leads directly to better health and strength.
Okay, yeah.
Or the excruciating failures you experience in a startup. Those teach you the actual mechanics of how to succeed in business. Willingly suffering through the awkwardness of a difficult conversation builds profound interpersonal courage.
So the suffering is the point.
The avoidance of suffering is, ironically, the most restrictive form of suffering.
So the antidote to this constant frantic striving is what the author famously calls not giving a feck.
But we need to put a massive asterisk here.
Oh, absolutely. Because this concept is wildly misunderstood. People hear that and they think it means sitting on the couch in sweatpants, ignoring your responsibilities, and just being a nihilistic blob.
Which is definitely not what he means.
Right. The sources outline 3 crucial subtleties that define what this actually means. And the first one is vital. Not giving a feck does not mean indifference.
Indifference is a trap.
How so?
People who are truly indifferent are just terrified. They are the internet trolls who hide behind endless layers of sarcasm and irony because they are deeply afraid of the world's judgment.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
If you care about nothing, you are paralyzed. True nonconformity, the subtle art we are talking about, means being comfortable with being different. It means staring failure, rejection, or embarrassment right in the face and choosing to take action anyway because you believe your action is right.
You don't care about the immediate adversity because your focus is locked on the ultimate goal.
Exactly, which flows directly into subtlety number 2. In order to not care about the adversity, you absolutely must care about something more important than the adversity.
But you need a bigger priority.
Think about that person you see at the grocery store screaming at a teenage cashier over an expired 30-cent coupon.
We've all seen that person.
Why are they doing that? They are doing that because they have absolutely nothing more meaningful in their life to care about. Their world is so devoid of purpose that a 30-cent coupon has literally become the epicenter of their emotional universe.
That's so sad, but so true.
You have to find a worthy problem to care about, or your brain will just invent petty ones.
Because human beings are biologically wired to care about things. We need a focal point.
We do. Which brings us to subtlety number 3. You are always inevitably choosing what to care about. The subtle art lies entirely in the curation of your attention.
The curation of your attention. I love that.
Psychological maturity is really just the process of strictly auditing and limiting what you care about, narrowing it down to what is genuinely worthy of your finite time and energy.
As you age, you realize your emotional bandwidth is incredibly limited.
So you stop wasting it on rude drivers or canceled TV shows or what an acquaintance thinks of your shoes. You ruthlessly save that energy for your family, your core values, your deep passions.
But this creates a massive philosophical collision.
Oh, so?
Well, if the backwards law tells us that trying to be happy actually makes us miserable and we need to seek out negative experiences to grow, it feels like our entire cultural definition of happiness is completely broken.
It is fundamentally broken.
Right. And to explain how to fix it, the sources pull from a brilliant historical example. Let's rewind a few thousand years and talk about the Buddha.
The origin story of Siddhartha Gautama. It perfectly illustrates the futility of escaping friction.
Exactly. Long before he was the Buddha, Siddhartha was a prince living in present-day Nepal. And his father, the king, had this incredibly grandiose, frankly delusional idea. He was going to completely shield his son from all human suffering.
An impossible task.
Literally impossible. But he tried. He built these massive, impenetrable walls around the palace complex. He provided the prince with endless feasts, beautiful servants, lavish gifts, and constant entertainment.
Total sensory overload.
For years, the prince grew up in a bubble of extreme opulence with zero knowledge that sickness, aging, or pain even existed in the world.
But eventually, a creeping emptiness set in.
Right. The endless pleasure just felt hollow. It meant absolutely nothing.
Because the human brain cannot function without contrast. So the prince eventually sneaks out of the palace grounds, and for the first time in his life, he sees a sick person, an aging person, and a dying person.
And it fundamentally traumatizes him.
It shatters his entire reality. He realizes his father's grand experiment was a complete failure. Wealth and pleasure cannot stop the reality of human decay.
So reeling from this, he swings the pendulum to the absolute opposite extreme.
As people often do.
He abandons his royal title, runs away from his family, gives away all his possessions, and decides to live in the dirt as an aesthetic beggar.
He embraces extreme physical
He
suffering.
practically lives on a single nut a day. He's starving himself to the brink of death, hoping that pain will bring enlightenment.
But after years of this intense poverty, self-flagellation, and torture, he has another profound realization, and it's incredibly disappointing.
Extreme suffering sucks just as much as extreme wealth.
Exactly. Rolling in the mud didn't bring him any more meaning than rolling in gold.
So if we extract the core psychological insight from this, the Buddha realized that life itself is inextricably bound to suffering.
You cannot separate the two.
The rich suffer precisely because of their riches. The paranoia of losing it, the isolation. The poor suffer because of their poverty.
The premise that modern society unconsciously operates under the idea that if we just achieve X promotion or buy Y house or marry Z person, we will finally arrive at a static state of permanent, pain-free happiness.
Total neurological illusion.
The complete illusion. Suffering is inevitable.
Which introduces my absolute favorite metaphor from the source material.
Oh, here we go.
Since we need to face this reality, the author suggests we need a new kind of superhero. His name is Disappointment Panda.
A highly necessary corrective to our current culture.
I just picture him in a Cheap, slightly too small superhero outfit with a giant T for truth on his chest, wearing a cheesy panda eye mask.
Yeah.
And he just goes door to door, ringing doorbells like a vacuum salesman, just to look people dead in the eye and deliver the harsh, objective truths they desperately need to hear but spend all their energy refusing to accept.
What kind of truths are we talking about?
He'd say things like, sure, making a lot of money feels good, but it won't make your kids actually respect you if you're never home. Or what you call being a loyal friend is actually just a codependent attempt to make people rely on you so you don't feel abandoned.
Disappointment, Panda, operates on the principle that suffering is biologically and evolutionarily useful.
Useful.
Yes. It is nature's preferred agent for inspiring behavioral change.
Explain that.
Think about the physical mechanism of pain. When you walk through your living room in the dark and violently stub your toe on the coffee table.
The worst.
Right, that intense, blinding physical pain is not a mistake. It is an evolutionary feedback mechanism screaming at your nervous system, do not do that again, or you will damage your physical structure.
Okay, that makes sense for physical pain.
But emotional pain works through the exact same neurological pathways. The acute pain of social rejection, the sting of a failed business venture, the grief of a breakup. These are vital data points.
They teach us our limitations.
They reveal our blind spots, and they show us how to adapt. If we coddle ourselves and build safe spaces where we avoid all emotional pain, we are effectively severing our connection to reality. We go numb.
Okay, I follow the logic. Pain is a feature, not a bug. But if pain is inevitable and useful, where does happiness actually fit into the equation?
Well, the text argues that happiness is not the absence of problems. True happiness comes from the active process of solving problems.
The operative word there is solving.
Exactly. If you constantly avoid your problems or numb yourself to them with alcohol or mindless scrolling, you will be deeply miserable. Conversely, if you feel like your problems are completely out of your control and unsolvable, you will also be miserable.
Right.
The psychological sweet spot, the secret sauce of human thriving, is the active, engaged process of finding solutions.
I hear that, but I have to push back here.
Go for it.
Because if I solve a problem, doesn't that just immediately spawn a new problem? Like, say, my problem is that I'm out of shape and feeling lethargic.
Okay.
I solved that problem by buying a gym membership and hiring a trainer. Great. But now I have the problem of waking up at 5 a.m., enduring a grueling workout, sweating through my clothes, and rushing to shower before I commute to work.
Right.
If solving one problem just unlocks a new, harder problem, aren't we just running on a never-ending treadmill of misery?
That is a very real phenomenon. It's known in psychology as the hedonic treadmill.
The hedonic treadmill.
We work incredibly hard to change our external circumstances, assuming it will permanently elevate our baseline happiness. But once we achieve the goal, we quickly adapt, the novelty wears off, and we return to our previous baseline of satisfaction. We just trade up for better problems.
So we're stuck.
But that is exactly the author's point. The secret to a fulfilling life isn't finding a reality with no problems. That doesn't exist. The secret is finding good problems that you actually enjoy solving.
Wait, explain what makes a problem good. Because if someone is listening to this and they are working 3 minimum wage jobs just to afford rent and keep the lights on, they might be thinking, this isn't a good problem. This is systemic poverty.
Yes, that's a very fair point.
Right. They're thinking, I don't enjoy solving the problem of deciding between buying groceries or paying for my electricity. How does the framework account for that?
That is a crucial distinction. We have to separate chosen struggle from forced systemic trauma.
No.
Systemic poverty, illness, or oppression are horrific, unchosen problems. But even within the confines of unchosen trauma, the psychological framework still applies. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust, wrote extensively about this.
Man's search for meaning.
Exactly. Even in a concentration camp where every choice was stripped away, the final human freedom was choosing one's internal response to the suffering. The people who survived psychologically were the ones who found a microscopic problem they could still solve, like comforting a fellow prisoner or sharing a crust of bread. They maintained an internal locus of control.
Wow.
But for the vast majority of people listening to this, the problems are largely chosen. The gym rat genuinely enjoys the pain of muscle fatigue and the puzzle of calibrating their macros. The entrepreneur enjoys the stress of navigating market risks.
So the breakdown happens because people want the reward without the friction.
Precisely.
They want the amazing sculpted physique, but they don't want the searing pain of the gym. They want the multi-million-dollar company, but they don't want the 80-hour work weeks and the risk of bankruptcy. They deny that problems are a package deal.
And this invites us to look deeper. Why do we so consistently choose the wrong problems? Why are we so desperate to avoid the necessary struggle?
The material suggests a cultural diagnosis. We have been fundamentally brainwashed into believing we deserve a frictionless, exceptional life simply by existing.
Which brings us face to face with the modern epidemic of entitlement.
And the source illustrates this beautifully with the archetype of Jimmy.
Jimmy.
Jimmy is that guy every single one of us knows. He is perpetually talking up his next billion-dollar startup idea. He's always name-dropping, always grinding, always posting motivational quotes.
But what's the reality?
The reality of his life is that he's essentially a deadbeat. He lives off his parents' money, spends his afternoons playing video games or getting high, and never actually executes a single business plan.
Yet his confidence is unshakable.
Yes. The most baffling part about Jimmy is that his self-confidence is absolutely bulletproof. If you gently critique his lack of progress, he immediately dismisses you as a jealous hater who just doesn't understand his genius.
Jimmy is not an anomaly. He is the ultimate predictable product of the 1970s self-esteem movement. For decades, Western psychology, parenting, and education aggressively pushed the idea that every single child is uniquely special, exceptional, and destined for greatness.
The participation trophy era.
Exactly. We handed out participation trophies just for showing up. We had children stand in front of mirrors reciting daily affirmations about how brilliant and flawless they were, completely divorced from their actual behavior or achievements.
Just feeling good for the sake of feeling good.
The prevailing sociological theory was that artificially inflating self-esteem would naturally lead to high performance and happiness.
But the longitudinal data came back, and it was a spectacular failure.
It turns out feeling incredibly good about yourself is totally useless and actually destructive if you don't have a tangible reason to feel good about yourself.
By constantly telling average people they were exceptional without requiring them to earn it, we just created a generation of Jimmys.
People who feel deeply entitled to the rewards of success without ever putting in the sacrifice, the struggle, or the discipline.
The material offers a profound redefinition of true self-worth here. In this framework, self-worth is not measured by how positively you feel about your successes or your supposed genius.
True, resilient self-worth is measured strictly by how honestly you can handle your negative aspects.
Can you look at your own flaws in the cold light of day and say, yes, I am highly irresponsible with money, it is ruining my life, and I need to take drastic steps to fix it?
Jimmy is entirely incapable of doing that. His entitlement is a fragile, delusional bubble designed to protect him from the reality of his own incompetence.
And what's fascinating is the author turns the lens on himself here. He admits that he fell into a completely different but equally toxic kind of entitlement.
It takes a lot of self-awareness to admit that.
It does. When he was 13 years old, he was this angry, rebellious kid. One day, his vice principal busts him for hiding a significant amount of drugs in a secret compartment in his backpack.
Wow.
Yeah. It completely detonates his life. He gets expelled, his friends abandon him, his parents end up getting a brutal divorce. And as a teenager, he took all that trauma and unconsciously wove it into a narrative that he was uniquely broken.
He believed his pain was special.
He believed his pain was so special and so deep that nobody else could possibly understand him.
This reveals a critical nuance. Entitlement actually wears two different masks.
Two masks, okay.
The first mask is the narcissist, the Jimmy. I am inherently awesome. The rest of you are peasants. Therefore, I deserve special treatment.
And the second mask?
The second mask is the eternal victim, the author's younger self. I am uniquely damaged. My trauma is worse than anyone else's. Therefore, the rules don't apply to me, and I deserve special treatment.
Wow. They look like exact opposites on the surface.
Aesthetically, they look like opposites, but at their psychological core, they are identical. They are both incredibly selfish, solipsistic worldviews. They both require the delusional belief that you and your specific problems are somehow exempt from the normal physics of human existence.
It's the ultimate main character syndrome.
Yeah.
And we have to talk about how the media ecosystem acts as gasoline for this fire.
Oh, absolutely.
The source calls it the tyranny of exceptionalism. Think about the mechanics of the internet. Our attention spans are incredibly limited, and media platforms are constantly competing for eyeballs.
Therefore, the algorithm only surfaces the extreme outliers.
Right. We open our phones, and we only see the absolute most shredded athletes, the youngest billionaire crypto founders, the most flawlessly beautiful models, or, on the flip side, the most horrific, sensational tragedies and political outrages.
We are subjected to a relentless bombardment of the extremes, but statistically, the vast majority of human life resides right in the fat, mundane middle of the bell curve.
Most of us are completely average at almost everything we do.
You might be an exceptional programmer, but you're an average cook, a mediocre tennis player, and a forgetful friend.
But because we only consume the extreme outliers, our brains are conditioned to believe that exceptionalism is the new baseline.
And when we compare our quiet, ordinary, average lives to that artificial baseline, we feel like profound failures.
It's like the modern anxiety of scrolling through Instagram filters. We see people with poreless skin and perfect vacations, and suddenly our normal human face and our weekend trip to a local park feel like symptoms of a wasted life.
So we overcompensate.
We try to cook up manic, get-rich-quick schemes, or we post desperate, attention-seeking rants online just to prove to the void that we matter, that we aren't invisible.
It creates a tremendous psychological burden. I would challenge anyone listening to just sit with this thought for a moment. Consider the immense liberating relief that washes over you when you simply accept the premise that you are average.
The relief of being average.
When you operate under the delusion that a life is only worthwhile if it is globally notable or famous, you are essentially accepting the toxic premise that most of the human population, including yourself, is worthless trash.
That's a dark way to live.
But when you finally let go of the crushing pressure to be the next big thing or to leave a massive dent in the universe, the anxiety dissipates. You are suddenly freed to genuinely appreciate the simple, ordinary things that actually sustain human happiness.
Like a quiet dinner with a friend, reading a good book, taking a walk, helping a neighbor.
Exactly.
Okay, so if we can accept the bitter pill that we aren't uniquely special, it forces us to look inward. If we are just average humans, by what metrics are we judging our average lives?
Are we using the right yardstick?
Right. And to explore this, the source details one of the most astonishing, wild historical stories I've ever heard. The story of Hiro Onoda.
It is a staggering historical case study on the meaning and power of human suffering.
Hiro Onoda was a soldier in the Japanese Imperial Army during World War II. In 1944, as the war was turning against Japan, his commander sent him to a tiny, miserable island in the Philippines with very specific orders. Wage a guerrilla war, fight to the absolute death, and under no circumstances are you to surrender.
Okay.
Well, as we know, the war ended in 1945. The U.S. and Japan dropped thousands of leaflets over the jungle announcing the surrender.
But Onoda didn't believe it.
He refused to believe it. He was convinced it was an elaborate American psychological trick. So he stayed in the jungle for 30 years.
30 years in the jungle.
He lived in squalor, eating bugs and stolen rice, sleeping in the mud, fighting a phantom war against local farmers, believing the empire was still intact.
Meanwhile, back in modernizing Japan, Onoda becomes a myth, a ghost story. It isn't until the 1970s that a young, eccentric Japanese hippie named Norio Suzuki decides he is going to seek him out.
Suzuki was an adventurer.
He famously declared he was traveling the world looking for three things: Lieutenant Onoda, a panda bear, and the abominable snowman, in that exact order.
And the craziest part is, Suzuki actually finds him. In just 4 days of walking through the jungle, he stumbles upon this grizzled, armed soldier who has been hiding for 3 decades. And they strike up this bizarre friendship.
And Onoda explains to Suzuki why he stayed.
He willingly gave up 30 years of his life, enduring unimaginable physical and psychological misery, because his ultimate overriding value was infinite loyalty to the Japanese Empire.
That metric gave his suffering complete meaning.
And tragically, Suzuki later died in an avalanche in the Himalayas while searching for the Yeti. Both of these men willingly chose immense, fatal suffering because they attached a very specific, deeply held value to that suffering.
Which brings us to a conceptual tool the author calls the self-awareness onion.
The self-awareness onion.
To understand why we choose to suffer or why we feel miserable, we have to peel back the layers of our own psychological awareness. And just like a real onion, the deeper you go, the more likely you are to cry.
Naturally. So what's layer one?
Layer one is simply the recognition of your own emotions. I feel sad. I feel angry. Surprisingly, a large percentage of adults struggle to even articulate layer one. They just act out their emotions blindly.
And layer two?
Layer two is asking the critical why you feel that emotion. I feel sad because my boss didn't give me the promotion I wanted.
But layer three is where the real existential heavy lifting happens. Layer three is identifying the underlying values and metrics that dictate that why.
Exactly. By what specific standard are you judging your success or failure in that moment? Why does the promotion define your worth?
To illustrate the profound impact of these Layer 3 metrics, let's analyze the contrasting trajectories of two very famous musicians.
Oh, the rock star examples. These are great.
In 1983, a highly talented guitarist was unceremoniously kicked out of his heavy metal band right before they were scheduled to record their debut album. He was put on a bus with no warning.
Brutal.
He was furious, and he vowed to start a new band, work relentlessly, and become so massively successful that his old bandmates would weep with regret. That guitarist was Dave Mustaine, and his new band was Megadeth.
Which went on to sell over 25 million albums worldwide.
By any objective earthly standard, selling 25 million albums is a staggering 1 in a billion success. Mustaine was a rock god, but the band that kicked him out was Metallica.
Who went on to sell over 180 million albums and become one of the biggest acts in human history.
Right. And decades later, in an intimate interview, Mustaine tearfully admitted that despite the mansions, the fame, and the millions, he still felt like a complete failure.
Because of his metric.
Yes,
Yeah.
because his underlying metric, his Layer 3 value was, I must be more successful than Metallica. Because he chose a metric he couldn't fully control, his massive success was converted into misery.
Now hold that against the story of Pete Best. Pete Best was the original drummer for the Beatles. In 1962, right on the precipice of Beatlemania changing the globe, the band fired him and replaced him with Ringo Starr.
That has to be the most painful firing in history.
Best watched from the sidelines as the band he helped build became the most famous people on Earth. He fell into a crushing depression and even attempted suicide.
But over time, Best did the hard work of peeling the onion.
He fundamentally changed his values. He decided that fame and global adulation were terrible metrics for his life. He shifted his metric to prioritizing a simple life, a stable marriage, and raising a loving family.
And it worked.
Decades later, giving interviews as a regular working-class guy, he declared that he was genuinely happier than he would have been if he had stayed in the Beatles.
It is the ultimate proof of concept. Dave Mustaine had millions of dollars, adoring fans, and absolute freedom, yet felt like a miserable loser. Pete Best lost out on being the most famous band in the history of the universe, lived a quiet life, and felt like a winner.
The objective circumstances did not dictate their happiness. The metrics they chose dictated their happiness.
This allows us to cleanly categorize the framework of our lives. The source explicitly divides this into shitty values versus good values.
Shitty values are things like the pursuit of constant pleasure, defining yourself by material success, the desperate need to always be right, and the forced toxic positivity we discussed earlier.
Why are they mathematically terrible?
Because they're entirely dependent on external circumstances. They are outside your locus of control.
Exactly. Think about it. If your primary value in life is, I need everyone I meet to like me, your self-worth is entirely outsourced.
It is constantly at the mercy of other people's moods, biases, and opinions.
You have handed the steering wheel of your psychological well-being to strangers. You have zero control over it.
Good values, on the other hand, are internal, controllable, and rooted in reality. Things like radical honesty, vulnerability, endless curiosity, and the willingness to stand up for yourself.
You can practice honesty right now, sitting quietly in your chair.
You can practice curiosity while reading a book. These values do not rely on a crowd applauding you or a bank account hitting a certain threshold. They are internal processes that you have complete sovereignty over.
So choosing better values means taking absolute ownership of our internal lives. But there is a massive, incredibly common roadblock that most of us crash into right here.
Oh yeah, the fault versus responsibility confusion.
When our lives are messy, we fundamentally confuse whose fault the problem is with whose responsibility it is. And this brings us to the hardest, most vital concept in the entire source material: radical responsibility.
This is undoubtedly the most challenging paradigm shift for people to accept. It requires dismantling a lot of deeply held ego defenses.
We get this incredible biographical sketch of William James. Born in the 19th century into a wealthy family, James was plagued by horrific health issues, debilitating back spasms, near blindness, severe stomach ailments.
And he was a chronic underachiever.
He dropped out of painting school, failed out of medical school, and finally joined a scientific expedition to the Amazon, where he immediately contracted smallpox and nearly died.
Just a series of disasters.
By his late 20s, he was living at home, a complete failure, constantly ill, and seriously planning to take his own life.
He was staring into the abyss, But before he committed suicide, he was reading the philosopher Charles Peirce, and he decided to conduct a radical one-year psychological experiment.
What was the experiment?
For exactly 365 days, he would operate under the belief that he was 100% responsible for absolutely everything that occurred in his life, regardless of whether it was technically his fault or not.
Wow, 100%.
He would take total ownership of his responses. If his life didn't improve after a year, he would end it.
Spoiler alert for the history buffs. He didn't end it. He went on to become a professor at Harvard and is now widely considered the father of American psychology.
His core realization was that while human beings do not always control what happens to us, we don't control the weather, the economy, or genetics. We always, without exception, control how we interpret what happens to us and how we choose to respond to it.
We constantly avoid taking responsibility because we suffer from a profound linguistic and conceptual confusion. We mistakenly believe that taking responsibility for a situation means accepting fault for that situation.
But fault and responsibility are entirely different concepts.
Fault is firmly in the past tense. It is the result of choices that have already been made, often by other people. Responsibility is entirely in the present tense. It is the result of the choices you are currently making right now in response to the situation.
Let me use an analogy here because this is where the rubber meets the road.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Imagine you inherit a house from a distant relative, but when you show up, the house is a disaster. The foundation is cracked, the roof is caving in, the pipes are bursting.
Okay, a real fixer-upper.
Now, it is absolutely not your fault the house is falling apart. You didn't build the bad foundation. You didn't neglect the plumbing. But the second you take ownership of that deed, it is entirely your responsibility to fix it.
You can't just stand in the flooded living room screaming at the ghost of your dead relative.
You have to pick up a wrench, call a plumber, or sell the land. The fault belongs to the past, but the responsibility to act is entirely yours.
And the source material does not shy away from applying this to extreme, real-world trauma to prove its universal application. Take the story of Malala Yousafzai.
An incredibly powerful example.
She was literally shot in the head by Taliban assassins simply for advocating for girls' education. It was in no way her fault that extremists tried to murder her, but she took radical responsibility for how she responded to that trauma.
Instead of retreating into silence or hatred, she used her miraculous survival to amplify her voice on a global stage, eventually winning the Nobel Peace Prize.
The text also references a fascinating BBC documentary that followed teenagers suffering from severe Tourette's and OCD.
Right. These kids did not choose their genetics. It was not their fault that their brains were misfiring and causing these debilitating compulsions.
But their intense cognitive behavioral therapy was based entirely on them taking absolute responsibility for how they managed those compulsions. They had to choose a value, like the desire to have a normal conversation, or go to a movie that was greater than the pain of resisting the titic.
And perhaps the most heartbreaking example is a man who commented furiously on the author's blog. This man's son had been killed by a drunk driver in a car crash, and he was enraged that the author would suggest he was responsible for his grief.
It's an unimaginable tragedy. The father was absolutely not at fault.
But the author's philosophical point stands firm. The father is still entirely responsible for how he chooses to carry that grief forward. He is responsible for how he treats his surviving family members, whether he turns to alcohol to numb the pain, or whether he finds a way to honor his son's memory.
The pain was violently forced upon him, but the response remains his agonizing, solitary choice.
Now, we need to carefully navigate how the source applies this concept to our current cultural climate.
Yes, the author makes a very sharp, very pointed critique of our modern internet culture. And I just want to note impartially, he points out that this isn't a left-wing or right-wing political issue. It is a fundamental human brain issue. He argues that passing off responsibility and claiming victimhood provides the brain with a massive dopamine hit of moral righteousness.
Yes, the neurological reward of feeling unjustly wronged.
Exactly. Regardless of where anyone stands politically, the human brain just loves the chemical high of playing the victim. The author calls this the culture of outrage porn and victimhood chic.
People on all sides of the spectrum become addicted to feeling deeply offended over minor, trivial infractions. A joke on a late-night show, a corporate logo change, a minor semantic disagreement.
Because playing the victim offers this intoxicating high. It makes you feel morally superior without actually having to do anything to improve the world. But the author warns that this constant ping-pong match of manufactured outrage is destructive because it sucks all the cultural oxygen away from actual, systemic, real-world victims who desperately need resources and attention.
Taking true responsibility requires us to step out of that warm, comforting bath of righteous victimhood and actually take action in the real world. But taking action means we have to make choices, and making choices means we might be wrong.
And human beings are absolutely terrified of being wrong. We cling to our deeply held beliefs like life rafts. If we want to grow, we have to confront the profound danger of absolute certainty.
This brings up the chilling story of Meredith Moran.
In the 1980s and 90s, there was this massive, destructive craze in psychology called repressed memory therapy. Therapists believed they could uncover hidden childhood traumas.
Meredith went to a therapist, and over several sessions, she, quote-unquote, remembered that her father had horribly sexually abused her as a child.
She was absolutely certain. She published books about it. It completely detonated her family, and her father died alienated and heartbroken.
And then years later, the science caught up, and she realized the memory was entirely 100% false.
She had literally reconstructed it in her mind based on the suggestions of her therapist. Her absolute certainty destroyed lives.
The material also tells the story of Erin, a woman who relentlessly stalked the author for years. She was completely convinced with absolute, unshakable certainty that she and the author were divinely ordained by God to cure physical death together.
Her certainty was a fortress. It made her completely immune to logic, to police restraining orders, to clear rejection.
It's terrifying to realize how flawed our hardware is. Why do our brains construct these elaborate fictions and defend them so fiercely?
Because human brains are fundamentally meaning-making machines. From an evolutionary standpoint, our neocortex evolved to spot patterns to keep us alive. Rustling grass means a predator.
But in modern life, it misfires constantly. It is highly inefficient and deeply biased. We will associate a random button press with a light flashing, even if the two are completely disconnected.
The hard truth is that we are fundamentally wrong about almost everything. Our memories are not video recordings. They are reconstructive puzzles that change every time we access them, like a neurological game of telephone. We actively rewrite our pasts to justify our present emotional states.
So if we are always wrong, what is the goal? The author argues that personal growth is not about finally finding the ultimate perfect right answer. Growth is just the messy, iterative process of becoming slightly less wrong over time.
You go from being massively wrong to slightly less wrong to even less wrong. Absolute certainty is the enemy of growth. If you are certain you already know everything, you literally cannot learn anything new.
Which leads directly into a fascinating, counterintuitive psychological concept that the text defines as Manson's law of avoidance.
Manson's law of avoidance.
The law states, the more something threatens your established identity, the more you will subconsciously or consciously avoid doing it.
Okay, wait, I need to push back and clarify this because it sounds crazy on the surface.
Yeah.
Are you saying that even if a new opportunity would objectively make me richer or solve my lingering problems or make me wildly happy, I will still actively sabotage and avoid it simply because it conflicts with how I view myself?
Yes.
Like if my core identity is the struggling, misunderstood artist, I will subconsciously ruin a lucrative gallery deal just to maintain my struggle.
Yes, absolutely. Because there is a profound, stabilizing comfort in knowing exactly how you fit into the world, even if that fit is miserable. Changing your core identity, even if you are changing it for the better, triggers a biological fear response that feels akin to psychological death.
The brain prefers familiar misery over unfamiliar happiness.
If your identity is the nice guy who always gets walked on, actually setting a boundary and breaking up with a toxic partner threatens the very foundation of who you think you are. Knowing yourself too rigidly can actually become a prison.
That is why the Buddhist concept of letting go of the strict narrative that you are a rebel, a victim, or a misunderstood genius is so liberating. It frees you to act dynamically without the fear of breaking character.
To help dismantle this dangerous certainty, the author suggests asking 3 critical questions whenever you feel intensely righteously certain about something. First, what if I'm wrong? Just pause and genuinely entertain the intellectual possibility.
Second, what would it mean if I were wrong? Usually, answering this honestly requires admitting that you are acting out of insecurity, jealousy, or selfishness, which hurts the ego.
And third, would being wrong create a better or worse problem? Admitting you are wrong and apologizing usually creates the better problem of forcing you to grow, be humble, and repair a relationship, whereas maintaining your certainty preserves the worst problem of isolation and stagnation.
But if we adopt this mindset and accept that we are constantly wrong, it forces us to start experimenting in the real world to find better answers. And experimentation, by its very definition, inevitably means failing. A lot.
Which is exactly what the author experienced. He shares his own brutal origin story.
He graduated from college right into the teeth of the 2008 financial crisis. No one was hiring. He spent months sleeping on gross futons, dealing with deadbeat roommates, counting loose change to buy McDonald's off the dollar menu.
But he had a profound realization. Because he was already at absolute rock bottom, failure had completely lost its sting.
If he tried to start some weird, long-shot internet business and it completely collapsed, what would happen? He'd just be a broke guy sleeping on a futon, which is exactly what he already was. The downside risk was zero, so why not try?
The crucial takeaway there is that failure is entirely relative to the metric you choose to evaluate it with. If his chosen metric was get a stable, prestigious corporate job by age 22, he was a catastrophic failure.
But his chosen metric was achieve autonomy and freedom. Under that metric, attempting the risky business was the only logical path, and settling for a safe, miserable job would have been the actual failure.
And the material gives us this incredible, legendary story about Pablo Picasso to illustrate the value of repetition and failure.
Picasso is an old man, world famous, sitting in a cafe in Spain. He's drinking coffee and absent-mindedly doodling on a used napkin. A woman recognizes him, watches him draw, and when he's about to throw it away, she asks if she can buy it.
Picasso says, sure, that will be $20,000.
The woman is flabbergasted. She says, "What? It took you exactly 2 minutes to draw that."
And Picasso looks at her and says, no, ma'am. It took me over 60 years to draw this.
It perfectly distills the truth that the magnitude of your ultimate success is based directly on how many times you have willingly failed at something.
If someone is vastly better than you at a skill, it is almost certainly because they have failed at it thousands of times more than you have. Think about human development. A toddler learning to walk falls down hundreds of times. They bash their knees, they cry, but a toddler never stops and thinks, you know what, I've fallen 5 times today. I guess walking just isn't my thing. I'm going to stick to crawling.
We only learn to fear and stigmatize failure later in life, often through rigid schooling systems or hypercritical parenting that punishes mistakes instead of rewarding the attempt.
We spend our adult lives trying to engineer a reality where we never experience the pain of failure. But the source references the work of Kazimierz Dabrowski, a Polish psychologist who extensively studied survivors of World War II.
He studied people who had endured the bombing of Warsaw, the horrors of the Holocaust, and mass starvation. And Dabrowski found something incredibly counterintuitive. A significant percentage of these survivors did not just experience PTSD. They experienced profound post-traumatic growth.
They reported that their immense trauma actually acted as a catalyst, making them more resilient, more responsible, and ultimately happier and more deeply connected people in the long run. The intense pain was the necessary crucible for their psychological evolution.
Pain is not an obstacle to the process of growth. Pain is the process. If you spend your life chasing superficial emotional highs, drugs, validation, endless entertainment, just to cover up the underlying pain of existence, you deprive yourself of the exact friction required to generate the motivation to actually change your life.
Which leads us to the ultimate, most practical tool in the entire book for initiating change, the do something principle.
The author credits this to his high school math teacher, Mr. Packwood. Packwood used to tell his students, if you're staring at a math problem and you're completely stuck, don't just sit there staring at the blank paper. Start writing something, anything, even if it's wrong, and the ideas will follow the action.
This completely flips our cultural understanding of motivation on its head. We typically operate under the assumption that motivation is a linear chain. First, you receive an emotional inspiration. You watch a great movie or hear a speech, which leads to motivation. You feel fired up, which finally leads to action. You go to the gym or write the chapter.
Because we believe this linear chain, if we don't feel inspired, we do absolutely nothing. We sit paralyzed on the couch, waiting for the magical lightning bolt of inspiration to strike us.
But the author argues it's not a linear chain, it's an infinite loop. Action leads to inspiration, which leads to motivation, which leads to more action. Action is not merely the effect of motivation, it is the fundamental cause of it.
If you lack motivation to start a huge project, you don't need a pep talk. You just need to execute the absolute smallest, most trivial, viable action.
If you want to write a book, don't try to write a chapter. Just commit to writing one incredibly crappy sentence. Just open the word document and type a title. If you need to build a website, just pick the font color. The simple physical act of doing something generates a small micro hit of momentum, which generates the inspiration to keep going. Action is the spark.
And once you adopt the do something principle and start taking consistent action, you naturally open yourself up to a massive world of options, relationships, and experiences. Your life expands. But to truly find deep meaning in that expanded life, you eventually have to face the paradox of choice. You have to start actively shutting doors. You cannot experience everything.
The author lived out this exact dilemma. In his 20s, he achieved the ultimate millennial dream. He became a digital nomad. He spent 5 years traveling the globe, visiting 55 different countries. He made his money online, hooked up with beautiful women, partied in exotic cities, and lived with absolute, total freedom. He answered to no one.
But eventually, a creeping nihilism set in. He realized the lifestyle was completely empty. Drowning himself in the endless breadth of experience completely denied him any profound depth of experience. By refusing to commit to one place or one person, everything became a blur.
He was chronically avoiding commitment because true commitment inherently requires rejection. You cannot commit to one path without rejecting all the alternative paths. To illustrate the cultural anxiety around rejection, the source contrasts the communication styles of the West with communication styles of Russia.
This cultural observation is wild. The author travels to St. Petersburg, Russia, and he is shocked to find that everyone there is brutally, almost aggressively honest. If you say something stupid or naive at a dinner party, they don't smile politely. They look you in the eye and tell you that your idea is stupid. There are no fake polite smiles, no small talk, no let's grab coffee sometime if they don't mean it.
And he realizes that in the West, particularly in America, our culture evolved in an environment of vast economic abundance and opportunity. We value fake politeness and networking because keeping our options open and selling a positive version of ourselves is economically advantageous.
But in Russia, historically shaped by brutal winters, scarcity, and oppressive regimes, survival depended entirely on knowing exactly who you could trust in an instant. So blunt, unfiltered honesty wasn't rude. It was a mandatory survival mechanism.
The contrast highlights a vital psychological truth. Healthy individuals and healthy relationships require strict boundaries, which means they require the ability to both reject others and endure being rejected. A relationship without boundaries is toxic. And the source uses the perfect literary example to dismantle our romanticized view of this, Romeo and Juliet.
Right. We are taught in middle school that it's the ultimate sweeping romance of Western literature.
But if you actually analyze the text through the lens of psychology, it isn't a romance at all. It's a dark satire of toxic, boundaryless infatuation. You have two teenagers who barely know each other. They decide to get married after a few days, incite a massive violent blood feud that gets their friends killed, and then impulsively commit double suicide. It is completely pathological. There are zero boundaries. Their entire identities are enmeshed in a manic obsession with the other person.
It's the definition of codependency. Unhealthy love is basically two people using each other to escape their own internal problems. Healthy love is two people solving their own internal problems side by side with each other's mutual support. And the author breaks this down into a toxic dance between two archetypes, the victim and the saver.
Yes. The victim is the partner who demands that others solve their problems in order to feel loved. Their internal monologue is, if you really loved me, you would have known I was stressed and you would have canceled your plans to manage my emotions.
And the saver is the partner who desperately needs to solve others' problems in order to feel worthy of love. Their internal monologue is, it's my fault she lost her job, I need to write a resume and fix her life, otherwise I have no value.
These two archetypes are drawn to each other like absolute magnets, but their relationship is a house of cards built entirely on conditional emotional manipulation.
If a saver genuinely wanted to help a victim, they wouldn't swoop in and fix the problem. They would set a firm boundary and say, I love you, but you losing your job is your problem to solve. I will emotionally support you while you figure it out, but I will not do it for you. Setting that boundary requires saying no. It requires rejection.
And we are utterly terrified of rejection and commitment because of the paradox of choice.
I liken it to the modern anxiety of trying to watch a movie on a Friday night. You open Netflix and you have 10,000 movies at your fingertips. You spend 45 minutes scrolling, terrified of picking the wrong movie, and you end up exhausted watching nothing and going to sleep.
Compare that to the 1990s, when you went to Blockbuster, picked one VHS tape, took it home, and fully committed to watching it, even if it was mediocre. Having infinite options creates infinite anxiety.
The ultimate profound conclusion of this section is that true freedom is actually found through commitment. By willingly choosing one partner to love, one career to pursue, one city to build a community in, you actively reject the endless distracting mirage of alternatives. That definitive commitment hones your focus.
It forces you to dig deep, discovering a level of intricate meaning, resilience, and joy that simply skimming the surface of 55 countries or swiping through 1,000 dating profiles could never provide. Freedom is not the absence of restriction. Freedom is choosing your restrictions.
Which brings us to the final, sobering crescendo of the material. There is one ultimate boundary, one ultimate unavoidable commitment, one final metric that forces us to strip away all the superficial nonsense, the follower counts, the car leases, the office politics, and look with absolute clarity at what truly matters. And that is confronting the reality of our own mortality.
The catalyst for the author's entire shift in perspective, the genesis of this whole philosophy, was a sudden, visceral encounter with death.
When the author was 19 years old, he went to a party at a lake with his good friend Josh. There was a cliff overlooking the water, maybe 30 feet high. Josh casually looked at him, smiled, and said, "Seek the truth for yourself, and I will meet you there." Then he turned, walked down to the edge, and jumped in.
The author got distracted by someone inside the house and didn't follow.
When he finally walked out to the patio a few minutes later, the party music was still blaring, but there was dead silence. Everyone was staring blankly at the dark water. It took scuba divers 3 agonizing hours to recover Josh's body. He had cramped up when he hit the water and silently drowned in the dark.
The sheer chaotic suddenness of that loss completely shattered the author's worldview. He realized in an instant that the universe owes us nothing. If there is no inherent grand reason to do anything, there is also no valid reason not to do anything. Our crippling fear of embarrassment, our social anxiety over asking someone out, our laziness about starting a project in the grand cosmic face of death, all of those fears are entirely laughably meaningless.
The text explores the psychology of this through the work of Ernest Becker. Becker was a brilliant, eccentric, cultural anthropologist who wrote a Pulitzer Prize-winning book while he was literally on his deathbed dying of cancer. The book is called The Denial of Death.
And Becker argued that human beings are entirely unique in the animal kingdom because we have the cognitive capacity to conceptualize a future without us in it. We know with absolute certainty that we are going to die. And this awareness creates a profound, underlying, subconscious hum of death terror.
This is the foundation of terror management theory. Because the conscious mind cannot handle the paralyzing terror of its own physical expiration, we create what Becker called immortality projects. We know our physical bodies will rot, so we desperately try to ensure that our conceptual selves, our identities, our names live on forever. We write great American novels, we build massive tech companies, we start religions, we carve our names into buildings, we have children, we want to leave a permanent dent in the universe so we are not forgotten by the void.
But the tragedy that Becker realized on his deathbed is that these immortality projects are actually the root source of almost all human suffering. When our immortality projects clash with someone else's immortality projects, we get holy wars, bigotry, and genocide. When our personal immortality projects fail, when the business goes bankrupt or the novel is rejected, we fall into crushing suicidal despair.
Becker's bitter antidote was that the only way to achieve true psychological freedom is to stop building defensive projects and directly confront, accept, and look into the reality of your own inevitable death.
It's exactly the visceral exercise the author undertakes years later at the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa. He walks away from the tourist path, right up to the edge of a massive sheer cliff, dropping hundreds of feet into the violent ocean. He inches forward until the tips of his shoes are hanging over the abyss. His mammalian brain goes into absolute screaming biological panic. But he forces himself to stand there. He forces himself to look down and physically accept the sheer fragility of his meat sack body. He accepts that one gust of wind could erase him from existence.
He stares directly into the void. And he realizes that keeping death in the forefront of your mind completely obliterates all the fragile, crappy, superficial values we obsess over daily. When you truly remember that you are going to die, you instantly stop giving a feck about the rude cashier at the grocery store. You stop caring if your neighbor bought a nicer car than you. You stop agonizing over how many likes your vacation photo got. Death is the ultimate clarifying lens. It forces the only question that actually matters. What is your legacy? How will the world be tangibly slightly better because you were here?
Confronted mortality strips away all entitlement. It destroys the illusion that you are the center of the universe. It forces you to connect to something greater than yourself, something outside of your own petty ego and your endless demands for comfort.
So we have to ask, what does this all mean for you right now? We started this deep dive looking at the modern self-help aisle, at that relentless, toxic machine of positivity that promises a frictionless, pain-free life if you just smile hard enough. But we've seen that the diagnostic landscape of the human mind is much darker and much more beautiful than that. The path to a genuinely good life isn't about avoiding pain. It isn't about demanding the universe give you a life with zero problems. It isn't about expecting to feel exceptional and happy every second of the day.
It's about the meticulous curation of your suffering. It's about choosing the right things to give a feck about. It's about finding good, meaningful problems that you actually want to dedicate your finite energy to solving. It's about establishing healthy boundaries in your relationships, taking radical, terrifying responsibility for your own responses to a chaotic world, remaining deeply skeptical of your own certainties, and being willing to be wrong, to fail, and to look stupid in the pursuit of growth.
It's about letting go of the incredibly heavy, exhausting burden of needing to be special. I want you, listening right now, to take a real, unflinching inventory of your life today. Where are you giving away your extremely limited frecks to things that simply don't matter? Where are you running on that hedonic treadmill, chasing the next hit of validation, while desperately avoiding the necessary productive pain of actual growth?
And as we close this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to mull over. Look very closely at what you are spending your time, your money, and your energy building right now in your life. Look at your career, your habits, your obsessions. Is what you are building a genuine expression of your chosen internal values? Or is it just an immortality project? Is it just a shiny, stressful distraction designed to hide the terrifying reality that one day you won't be here? And if you found the profound courage to let that project go today, who would you be tomorrow?